Hi, I'm back. We're going to do Judges today, so let's get started. First, I want to show you in this book, the Breaking Through book, I like this top part, Have You Ever Met Someone? And it basically talks about, this is the book of Judges, but they're not judges like in our legal system. They're a little bit different. They're military leaders, some local heroes. They're all different kind of judges. So just so you know, maybe you could read that at some point. And that's what I like about this book, because with each new book, it kind of gives you sort of like Jeff Cavins, but of course I like Cavins better. So it gives you a few factoids, like who wrote the book and just some history behind it, and all that. So I like that. So I thought that would be good to talk about. So, okay, so we're over here to Judges. And we're starting with Israel's failure to complete the conquest. So the book of Judges starts with the Israelites asking which part of Canaan they should conquer next and who should be the lead. So, of course, we know this is Israel, Canaan. The Lord told them, Judah, and I have given and delivered them into your hand. So the Lord delivered the Canaanites, the Perizzites, and then they defeated 10,000 men at Bezek. At which time Adoni-Bezek, the leader of Bezek, I guess the king, fled, but they pursued him. They caught him and they cut off his, weird enough, thumbs and great toes, used to pick up. Okay, what he said was, Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and their great toes cut off, used to pick up scraps under my table, as I have done. God has repaid me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. So that was an interesting and brutal story. This book is a very brutal book, especially at the end. We're not going to get to that today, but I will tell you it's a very brutal ending. So then it follows with victories, overtaking Jerusalem, Negeb, Nepath, and Zephath, Ashkelon, Ekron, and then they took possession of the hill country. But they could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain because they had chariots of iron. So evidently that is a very important military tool in war back then. And then, let me see, what is that? Okay. All right. And then Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said, and he drove out from there the 3 sons. So, but the people of Benjamin, let's see. Yeah. The people of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites, so they have dwelt with the people of Jerusalem to this day. Now remember, this is written a long time ago, so I don't know if that means to this day current. Okay, the house of Joseph took Bethel, but they let some of them go, and some of the people went and built a city called Luz. And that is still the name today. And again, written a long time ago. I don't know how current it really is. But it has my curiosity up. So, this basically is telling us each city and who took who. So God wanted us to know that. Okay. And then it goes into, they did not drive out the inhabitants there. And here. So it goes on and on that they didn't drive them out here. They didn't drive them out there. So the repeats always tell us that God's telling us something important there. It goes through the names and the places. Remember, God told them to drive out everyone, kill everyone, or they would be a thorn in their side. And I'm sure you've seen the news. We're still in Israel. They're still trying to take over their land thousands of years now. Still. So, okay. So we're getting up here to 2. Israel's disobedience. So the angel of the Lord came and said, I took you out of Egypt to the promised land, as I promised your ancestors. I promised I would never break my covenant with you, but you must not make any covenant with the people who live in this land. I told you, Israelites, you must tear down their altars, but you have not done what I told you. You have done the opposite. So now I will not drive out these people as you advance. They will be your enemies, and you will be trapped by the worship of their gods. That is very powerful. When the angel said this, all the people of Israel began to weep. And now that place is called Bachem. Wow, this may be an old book, but that's still happening today, thousands of years later. I think the Lord means when he says what he says here in this 1,600-page book. And the best way for the people not to forget the Lord is for the parents to educate them properly in reading this book. God left this for us, the most popular book in the world, yet we still keep forgetting him. We're living in such a secular world today. And we have to make our children aware of these things and our grandchildren. The death of Joshua. As long as Joshua lived, the people in Israel served the Lord. And even after his death, the leaders who were alive so that seen for themselves all the great things that the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua died at 110 years old. And it says where he died, and the whole generation also died, and the next generation forgot the Lord and what he had done for Israel. So, Israel's unfaithfulness. Then the people of Israel sin against the world, since the people of Israel sin against the Lord and begin to serve Baal. You know who Baal is. That's Satan. They stopped worshiping the Lord God of their ancestors who brought them out of Egypt. They began to worship other gods and the gods of the people around them, and they bowed down to them and made the Lord very angry. The Lord became furious and let the raiders attack and rob them. He let all the enemies around them overpower them. The Israelites could no longer protect themselves. Every time they went into battle, the Lord was against them, as he said he would be, and they were in great distress. Then the Lord gave the Israelites leaders. Okay, so who would save them from the raiders. But Israelites paid no attention to their leaders, and they worshipped other gods still. Their father had obeyed the Lord's commands, but the new generation, they just didn't. They forgot about him. Whenever the Lord gave Israel a leader, the Lord would help that leader and would save the people from their enemies as long as that leader lived. The Lord would have mercy on them because they groaned under their suffering and oppression. But when the leader would die, the people would return to their old ways and behave worse than the previous generation. They would serve other gods and stubbornly continue their own evil ways. Then the Lord would become furious with Israel and say, "This nation has broken the covenant that I commanded their ancestors to keep because they have not obeyed me. I will no longer drive out any of the nations that were still in the land when Joshua died. So now I will use them to find out whether or not the Israelites will follow my ways as their ancestors did." So he's kind of testing them in this particular book. So I will use them to find out whether or not the Israelites will follow my ways. So the Lord did not get victory over them, nor did he drive them out soon after Joshua's death. Okay, so 3. The nations remaining in the land. So the Lord left those nations to test the Israelites. He did this in order to teach the generations of Israelites about war, especially those who had never been to battle before. Remember, we talked about war and having to have strategies. Those are learned skills, like we here in America when our founders came here. You know, they had specific survival skills that, you know, you had to be tough and fight. And most of us today, we don't know how to fight like that. We know how to fight in court. They maybe wouldn't know how to do that. You know, it's that kind of thing. There's even different strategies back then, obviously, because we have different weapons to this day. And that's why teaching proper history and accurate history is important to newer generations and our children. You know, we need to put things in perspective for them. And that's why accurate history important for our children, just like we need to teach our children about the Lord. And he wrote this 1,600-page book deliberately with every detail for us to know and teach our children. He says it here. He says it here. He tells us that. Personally, I feel very derelict in my duties as a mother, and now I hope I can make up with these videos. I hope someday my descendants will watch these videos, not even just my kids, my grandkids. I hope. I'm praying. If YouTube's still around, God only knows. Maybe I'll put them on a DVD. I don't know. I'll pray about it and do what I can to preserve it and ask God to handle the rest. So, okay. So the Israelites are being tested to see if they would obey the commands the Lord has given them and their ancestors through Moses. So the Israelites dwelt among these different groups of people they list here, and they begin to intermarry with them. I remember the Lord told them not to intermarry. Told them that. So, Othniel. The Israelites did what was evil, that is, forget the Lord, and serve Baals, who we know as Satan. The Lord's anger was kindled. God sold the Israelites into the hand of Cushan-Rathian, and they served them for 8 years. The Israelites cried to the Lord. Don't we always cry once we get ourselves into trouble, right? Oh, these pages. Once again, God delivered them. And the Cushan-Rathian king, So, once again, God delivered them with Othniel. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel and went to war. He's one of the judges, and went to war, and the Lord delivered Cushan-Rathian king into his hand. So the land had rest for 40 years until Othniel died. Ehud, the Israelites fell into evil again. So another leader rose up, Ehud. And this is a very violent account that is described here. So if you want to read it, it's very violent. And then very brutal too. And then he saves the Israelites again, because using Ehud. And then they have rest for 80 years. Shamgar. Apparently Shamgar killed 600 Philistines, and he delivered Israel again. It doesn't say how long with this leader. Then we get to the big story of this. One of the big stories. Deborah and Barak. For Deborah, who apparently was very special, I jumped over here into the Bible for young Catholics because I feel like they did a good job with her. Let me find it. Where are we? We're past Othniel. Okay, so we're here with Deborah, Barak. So I kind of like the way they wrote it out. Again, they do simpler for children. So I feel like this particular story, obviously, it's the same story as here in Jeff Cavins' Bible, obviously. But I feel like it was told better. and mostly because of this box here. A brave and wise Deborah was very unusual for her time. She's the 4th judge and the only woman known to be a judge. She sits under a palm tree and gives wise advice to all the people who come to her. Then she received a message from God and commands Barak to go to war. Barak refuses unless Deborah agrees to go with him. Another weak Barak. How about that? So he felt the army wouldn't take him seriously or follow him unless he was with Deborah. Barak and all the people who came to Deborah for judgment and advice must have trusted her a lot. So, wow, wow, wow. Back in a time, a woman that a man feels he needs for strength to go to war. Wow. He's a pretty weak man. I'm judging. I'm guessing that. So, let's see. I think it says go to 240. Okay. Yeah, and then here's the Song of Deborah. So we're on 5. After the victory over the Canaanites, Deborah and Barak sing this song in Judges. It's a very long song. I didn't go through all of their strategy, but this song is so sweet that sometime you might want to look. It's like a 2-page song here. And then in here, if you do, it gives a little bit more of, what they did and praising God and thanking him. So this is a nice little box in there. Okay, so back over here. So 6, where are we at? Okay, so we're up here. The Midianite oppression. Okay, so the Midianite oppression, again, the sons of Israel did what was evil in sight of the Lord. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. Once again, the Israelites call out to the Lord for help, and the Lord sent a prophet to them. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage. I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and all who oppressed you. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I am the Lord your God. And you shall not pay reverence to gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but you have not given heed to my voice. And the reason they haven't given heed, you could say, oh, well, they're different generations and, and their parents didn't teach them and all, or rather you could say, oh, well, these people are like ADD, they keep going. But these are generation after generation. And the reason it continues is because they did not teach their children. Just like us today, we have to do that. Oh, and was I supposed to show this box? Hold on. In 6. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's for our next part. This is basically about Gideon. And I thought this was good, and that's the next one coming up. So and then that one. Okay, so the call of Gideon, where are we at? Okay, so an angel of the Lord comes to call Gideon. So it's basically the same, like I said, but they emphasize particular parts, like in that box over there, and then here about miracles. So this one. And the miracles. Let me see. Have you ever asked for a miracle? Well, Gideon asked for a sign from God. He wants to be sure that this is what God really wants him to do. And God's response, he's not too happy. So, he doesn't He doesn't like to be asked for signs. Of course, I didn't know that. If you've ever asked for a miracle, I'm going to tell you, I have. I've spoken directly to God, and he sent me the signs that I asked for. And that memory still takes my breath away and ranks just above the 3 days I had my 3 children. So it was not only shocking, but profound. I thought, why would God actually talk to me? I'm nobody. And of course he talks to all of us. But I'm just telling you how I felt at that time, because I had been begging for a miracle for this time and a sign. And he literally gave me both. It's a very personal story. Otherwise, I would tell it to you. But I can tell you this. I have no doubt, because of that miracle and that sign, that God is real. And I've gotten closer and closer to him since then. And that was about 10 years ago. So, okay, back to Gideon. Okay. The call of Gideon. So God gives specific instructions for Gideon to do things so he can prove to him that he gives him all these instructions. This is like, I mean, like some of these things you'd think, what? But evidently it was needed. And so he tells him all these things to do. And then, so Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. And that was to destroy the altar of Baal. So he destroys the altar. By the way, if you look up Baal, you'll know it's a fertility deity, like the Pachamama. So I was saying Satan, but, some people say that. But it's actually fertility deity. And God does not like that. So I don't know if you know the story of the Pachamama that was brought in over there recently in near the Vatican. So when you find out who it is, so when they find out who it is after it gets destroyed, they're like, who did this? And obviously people said, well, Gideon did it. So they came after him. So, but the Spirit of the Lord took possession of Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet. So they come after him, he sounds the trumpet, and then they're all after him. So I guess after that, he goes back to the fear and says he needs a sign. So that box over here with the miracles, that came after this, the sign of the fleece. Meanwhile, he asks God for a sign, and the Lord is very annoyed, and he tells him, don't be angry with me. I'm going to say this once. And he told him exactly what to do, and the sign would convince him. And apparently it does. Okay. Do not let your anger burn against me. Let me speak this once only. Let me make this trial only once with this fleece. So that tells me God does not like when we ask him to give us signs. So just keep that in mind. The sign of peace. The sign of fleece, rather, that was. And as we've heard from previous books, like I said, I asked for mine 10 years ago. Obviously, I didn't know that, but I'm still grateful. I got it, and it was amazing. In a desperate situation, I'm grateful. So, 7. Gideon selects the army to fight the Midianites. The Lord finally gets him to act, and he uses a unique strategy to win the victory with the Lord's help. After the Lord pares down his men from 22,000 all the way down to 300. Yes, 300. Okay? He needs to give Gideon the courage to act. So in the middle of the night, the Lord tells Gideon to get up, and he tells him to go and listen outside the tent of the men. And he hears them saying they had a dream that Gideon had the victory over them. So remember we talked about what I learned in military is half of the strategy is scaring your other person, which the person, your opponent, which President Trump does really well, just saying. So Gideon routs the Midianites. Let me just say I do not know what this word rout means. And again, it's an antiquated military term or a fighting term from a long time ago. But you can look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary online. It's really interesting. So, okay, so Gideon went back to instruct his men and told them about the guy and the guy's dream about Gideon. So he tells all the guys about it. Then apparently someone interpreted the dream because it evidently wasn't clear, but it meant they knew that Gideon would win. So he got even more confident. So apparently this interpretation gave him his strategy. So I guess that's what the Lord had planned. So then he gives them very specific instructions, including the blowing of the trumpet. Okay? Tells them exactly what. So, it's all here. Everything I just told you. So, Gideon's triumph. Okay, the grapes of Ephraim. Here we go again with the grapes of Ephraim. Remember the title of the book of Numbers about the grapes of wrath? So, if you'll notice, laced through our modern culture, that the Bible is woven into many stories, even though it's all denied, and it's embedded in our world. And they use the wisdom of the Bible to make their stories better, because stories run through our psyche. And like Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge, everyone tries to claim it's their knowledge, their unique knowledge, but it comes back to the story as the story of all time. The wisdom of our Lord. Just always remember that. Look for it in stories, you'll see. Okay, back to Gideon's triumph. So it goes through him pursuing those kings, and he's pursuing certain groups and telling them, he's in this fight for the land. And they're like, we're not going to help him. So once he catches the Midianite kings, Gideon, he brings them back to the people that didn't help him, and he kills them right there in front of them. They mock him first and say, oh, you want them to kill me? But no, he had his reason. So all the people grab the gold that these kings are carrying with them on their camels' necks, and real heavy, evidently they would put heavy gold necklaces on their camels and on them. Gideon says, okay, hand it over, all of it and everything. So there is as much as 40 pounds. It says right here, there as much as 40 pounds. So Gideon takes it, and he makes an ephod, which is a breastplate. You can look it up on Google. Just put images and ephod and Gideon, and you'll get the idea of what it looks like. So here it says, all Israel played the harlot after it, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Basically saying the idolatry seduced them. So instead of saying that, God saved them, they're like the gold, they got their eyes on the shiny things. And the Breaking Through Bible explains it is like the Gideon made an idol from the gold and put it in his hometown, Ophrah. And all the Israelites abandoned God and went there to worship the idol. It was a trap for Gideon and his family too. It was they called it a snare. So anyway, Gideon defeated them, saved the Israelites from them. So the men of Israel say, oh, you can rule over us and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us out of the hand of Midian. But Gideon says, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. Only the Lord will rule over you. And then the Breaking Through Bible explains it like this. Gideon made an idol from the gold, like I said, put it in his hometown, Ophrah, and all the Israelites abandoned God, went there to worship the idol. It was a trap. And meanwhile, Gideon has 70 sons. And one of them is named Abimelech. So Gideon dies, and the Israelites go back to worshiping Baal. They did not remember the Lord or who rescued them from the hands of the enemy, and they did not show kindness to the family of Gideon for all the good he did. Remember that snare. So Abimelech in 9 tries to establish a monarchy. I guess he never forgot that they wanted them to, his family to rule over them. So that's the son of Gideon with Jerubbaal, his mother, who had been Gideon's male maidservant. Apparently had many wives and maidservants, which they call them concubines or maidservants. Eventually, Abimelech didn't agree with his father, and he wanted that admiration back, and he wanted to rule over them. You know what this reminds me of? Even though it was sometime later, Abimelech never forgot they wanted the family to rule. Even though many years later, it just goes to show you how no words spoken or are forgotten, and how much our egos want to be stroked. Our egos are a trap too. The gold is a trap, the idolization, but so are the egos. And I think of the Hollywood, you know. So back to Gideon. So Abimelech gets his mother to, Gideon's gone. We're doing Abimelech now. So Gideon gets his mother to go to her family and try to get them to support him becoming king. And so he says to them, I want you to say this to the citizens. 2 questions. Which would be better? For you to have all 70 sons of Jerubbaal rule over you? Or 1 to rule over you? Apparently, she had a lot of children too, or they're talking about the same children of Gideon. So yeah, what kind of question is that? Telling them he will be ruling over them one way or another. Oh, and then he adds, remember also, I am your bone and your flesh. So all his kinsmen spoke on his behalf to all the people. Meanwhile, they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal with Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hires worthless and reckless fellows who followed him. So then he and his followers go and kill all of his brothers except for Jotham, who hid. So all the citizens come together, make Abimelech the king, and Jotham's parable of the trees, vine, and bramble. So he says that when he was told his brother was then king, he says, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, shall I leave my fatness? Okay. Then he goes on. And the trees said to the fig tree, come you and reign over us. And the fig tree said to them, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go sway over the trees? And then the tree said to the vine, come you and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine which cheers gods and men and go sway over the trees? Then all the trees said to bramble, come you and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out and bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore you acted, if you had acted in good faith and honor when you made Abimelech king, you would have dealt well with Zerubbabel, and have done to him and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved. For my father fought for you and risked his life and rescued you from the hand of Midian. And you have risen up against my father's house this day and have slain his son, 70 men on one stone. Because after Abimelech becomes king, he kills all his brothers except for this one. what's his name? Jotham. So he says, you killed all my brothers with one stone, and made Abimelech, son of a maidservant, king over the citizens of Shechem, because he is your kinsman. And if you then have acted in good faith and honor, rejoice in Abimelech, and let him rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out of Abimelech and devour the citizens of Shechem. And Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer. Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. And God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the man of Shechem. He started to drive a wedge in them. And the men of Shechem ambushed against him, and they robbed all who passed them by the way. And it was told to Abimelech. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, moved into Shechem with his kinsmen and put confidence in him. And the men put confidence in him. And they went into the field and gathered the grapes of their vineyard. And they held a festival and went into the house of their God and ate and drank and reviled Abimelech. They hated him. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, who is Abimelech that we should serve him? So the people, then should the people who were under my hand, I will remove Abimelech. I would say to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard these words, and he sent messengers to Abimelech and said, they're stirring up the city against you. And then, so the men lie in wait in the cities, and then in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, you rush to the city, and the men that are with them come against you, and they may do to you as the occasion offers. And so what they do is God tells the men what to do. And so, let's see. Abimelech fought against the city all that day and killed the people that were in it. When all the people of the tower heard, they entered the stronghold in the house of Elbereth. Abimelech was told, all the people of the tower were gathered together. Abimelech took the axe in his hand and cut down a bundle of brushwood, and he told the men to do the same. So they all did it, and they set a stronghold of fire over them, so that all the people of the tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it. And a certain woman threw an upper millstone upon Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. He called hastily to the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, lest the men think a woman killed me. And the young man thrust the sword into him, and he died. So God repaid the crime of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing of his 70 brothers. And God also made all the wickedness of the men of Shechem fall back upon their own heads. And upon them came the curse of Joham, the son of Jerubbaal. Remember the curse over here he gave them? He told them that was what was going to happen. And so that God didn't tell them what to do. I shouldn't have said that. But that's what happened in that case. So we'll continue next time.